Hello and welcome to You Talking to Me. How committed is the European Union to fight tax evasion, and how serious are member states about that? That's our topic today to discuss with journalists of Euranet Plus network. I'm very happy to welcome in our studio Hugues Beaudoin from Radio Classique. Bonjour. And Artjoms Konohovs from Latvia's radio.
Hello.
Hello and welcome. So at the very beginning this year, new leaks showed that Luxembourg was blocking EU efforts to tackle tax evasion. The Commission President, this happened at the time when the Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker was Prime Minister in Luxembourg and also Finance Minister in Luxembourg. Artjoms, Jean-Claude Juncker always said that he had nothing to do with the sweetheart deals offered to multinationals in Luxembourg. How credible is this Commission President right now?
I think very few people actually believe that he was in complete absence of any knowledge about what was going on. And in fact, indirectly, he has admitted that they needed to diversify the Luxembourgish economy, and that's why this system was introduced. Yes, maybe he was not aware of every single case, but he was aware definitely of the system, because that's what Luxembourgish economy was actually able to profit from, massively over the years. Therefore, obviously, I don't think that many people are buying to what he's saying. And right now, one could potentially even agree with Marine Le Pen when she was ironic at the European Parliament, saying that when Jean-Claude Juncker is calling himself the biggest fighter on tax evasion, that was causing her the biggest laugh of the day. So here, one could agree with her. At the same time, obviously, Commission is still calling it the reheating of the cold soup. That was how it was called at the press conference, and saying that there has been a lot of measures taken in order to fight tax avoidance and tax evasion. And obviously, right now, the Commission and Commission President and other institutions are basically forced to do something, because there is a pressure and then there is a demand in the society as well for that.
And very important in these are member states, and the big question is how committed are they? And I quote the leaks where a diplomat said it has become abundantly clear once again that the majority of member states are not interested in real reform. So this sounds more like lip service than real commitment.
In many ways, I think there is still a point to be made about the tax competitions between the countries, because the social systems, the tax systems are so different across the European Union that the bigger reforms would require also to even that out a little bit, the tax systems. And that is something that instrument is what countries do not want to let go, and they want to try to attract companies one way or the other, just the way the Ireland is doing, the way the Netherlands is doing, other countries who maybe have other high expenses, like in Belgium, we could talk about the very high labor costs, but then again, if they can offer some other deals then, and location and other things, and they can attract companies. So this is the instrument that I don't think countries will be willing to give up so easily, and there is to my mind, is one of the important stumbling blocks when we do talk about the tax avoidance and any reforms in that.
What about Latvia? Is this an important topic in your country?
In Latvia, it's less of an important topic, because we don't have such an industry, and we don't have the system where companies are given this fixed decisions.
But Latvia was called tax haven of the Baltics.
In many ways, for the fact that we have a lower taxes, it's a lower tax rate, and it's cheap labor costs as well, and other costs are much cheaper than if you look, let's say, at Scandinavian countries that are nearby. I think in Latvia, the bigger problems is the fact that banks are being used to do some money laundering exercises. Mostly it's not the local money, it's money that comes from Russia, from Ukraine, from Moldova, and other post-Soviet countries that is being channeled through the Latvian banks. And there has been a lot of suspicion and a lot of points made that Latvian authorities need to do actually much more in order to avoid this money laundering rather than tax evasion.
Okay, thank you. Hugues, in France, it is a big topic, no doubt about that. French journalists are very involved in investigation on tax evasion. Again, I'd like to quote a diplomat saying, according to the leaks, it's impressive to see how some member states present themselves outwardly as proponents of tax reforms and at the same time to watch how they actually behave in new discussions protected by confidentially. So how committed is France?
You said it's a big topic in France. Yes, it is, but it's very new because there is a lot of hypocrisy in France from many years. The state, the state in France is traditionally, something that you respect. And there's a kind of belief in the role of the state in France. But when you look at what the state is doing, that is a shareholder in many companies. Like we were talking a few days ago about the tax optimization of ex-GDF Suez in Luxembourg. The main shareholder of NG, ex-GDF Suez, is the French state. It's the same for the air company Air France and many other companies. And for many, many years, the state knew that its own companies were doing tax optimization, tax evasion in other European countries. And it didn't do anything about that. So you have a political discourse saying that we have to fight against tax evasion. In another situation, you tolerate it. 3 years ago, we had a big political affair in France where the budget minister himself, Mr. Cahuzac, was having a bank account in Switzerland and other tax haven in overseas territories. And of course, he has been sentenced to jail for 3 years jail. But it's the first time a politician in France, many of them have bank account in Switzerland and other countries. That's the first time that a politician has been sentenced to jail for this situation. In France, we always say in France that you are always the tax haven of somebody else. If we look at the situation between France and Belgium, France is always criticizing Belgium because of its tax system. But the tax administration here says to France that France is tolerating Belgian taxpayers could just have a mailbox in France to avoid the Belgian tax system. And the French administration didn't do anything against that. You have thousands of Belgians who have just a mailbox just across the border in France, just not to pay the social taxes in Belgium. So you cannot on one side say, okay, we want to fight against tax evasion, and on the other side accept the situation.
So this might be a reason why, if we assume that Luxembourg blocked some decisions, this might be a reason why nobody spoke up against it.
Yes, because they know that if you look at what's happening in your own country, you have a lot of grey situation. I wouldn't say that it's black and white. You have a lot of grey situation where it's in your interest not to have for instance, your companies paying the normal level of tax. If you look at the small company in France, the normal level of tax is about 33%. A big company doesn't pay more than 5%. And everybody knows that. As the state has never done anything so that you have an equal treatment between big companies and small companies.
And if we again look at the Commission president said it's one of the priorities to fight tax evasion. The commissioner in charge, Pierre Moscovici, he seems to have some difficulties. He came up with some initiatives, but he seems to have some difficulties to convince other member states to follow.
It's probably a question of personality, because Mr. Moscovici has always had difficulties to convince even when he was Minister of Economy in France. He was number 2 or number 3 in the government, but he had always difficulty to convince its own administration the reform on reforms that was on the program of François Hollande. And second thing, he was prepared to be economic and finance commissioner.
So this was not what he wanted.
But it it was not what he wanted. He discovered the day he was Juncker announced the composition of the commission that it was also an issue that he had to deal with. So he had to catch up also, and but we know that it's not his priority.
Okay, let's go to Luxembourg with Pia Oppel from Radio 100.7. Hello, Pia.
Hello.
Pia, there were several national parliaments who have sent opinions to the Commission saying that the planned reform on company taxation breaches with the principle of subsidiarity. Luxembourg was one of these countries. My question is this a sign that the current lawmakers are not willing to change Luxembourgish policy on taxation?
At least that's the impression one could get. The official justifications, of course, go in a different direction. The essence of a resolution that the Luxembourgish Parliament voted recently is that Luxembourg does not accept that the EU Commission tries to regulate national tax issues. So that is a clear no to further harmonization of tax rules in the EU. It's interesting to mention that in this case there weren't made any statements at all. Parliament voted this resolution just before Christmas without any discussion in the plenary. The whole procedure took less than a minute, and there were only 2 votes against the resolution from the 2 parliamentarians of the left opposition. But even they didn't raise the issue publicly. The press did after a while, and their analysis was, yes, Luxembourg has changed its course, at least on a symbolic level, and it's no longer claiming or trying to claim that it wants to accept more international rules as it did these last 2 years after LuxLeaks.
And speaking about the leaks, we just mentioned the new leaks just from the beginning of this year. What was the reaction in Luxembourg on these revelations?
There were almost no reactions at all. The journalist from The Guardian who wrote the article about Luxembourg's position in the Code of Conduct group on business taxation, he contacted the Luxembourgish Finance Ministry, and in the article he mentions that he got the reaction as it is usual from Luxembourg. They didn't want to comment, but they explained that Luxembourg has been at the forefront of the global trend towards greater transparency in tax matters. End of quote. The press mentioned the leak here in Luxembourg, but mostly by saying that this issue had already been raised by German media a while ago, so nothing special there either.
Now, this new government said repeatedly that it's committed to fight tax evasion, that the policy changed. Is this true? Is this what you think about this government?
I think at this point it's really difficult to say, but I have the impression that the Finance Minister Pierre Gramegna is actually really convinced that he has to stop some of the really harmful instruments for tax avoidance. So there is, for example, a new law that establishes very clear and much more strict rules for the so-called tax rulings. The minister has also said publicly that if companies like, for instance, McDonald's, who have recently moved their European headquarters from Luxembourg to Great Britain, I think, that they weren't welcome here anymore if they were only here for tax purposes. So that is a clear statement, I guess. But on the other hand, Luxembourg is definitely not a proactive player in the fight against tax avoidance, and maybe it tried to portray itself like that these last 2 years, but it won't go in that direction. The idea of the international level playing field remains important to the government, so they look very closely at how far other countries are going with their efforts and whether there are any harmonizations that might be avoided, for example, by blocking them in negotiations behind closed doors. So I think the government tries to achieve that the status quo stays.
Okay, thank you, Pia. From Luxembourg, we are going to Ireland with Sarah Collins, Euranet Plus journalist. The Irish Parliament was also one of those opposing the reform on taxation of companies. Sarah, is this common sense in Ireland among all political parties?
Ireland has formally lodged its opposition to the Commission's proposal on a common consolidated corporate tax base. Its main argument is that the proposal infringes on tax sovereignty and amounts to tax harmonisation or an attack on tax rates by the back door. Most political parties support the government, even Sinn Féin, which is on the left of the political spectrum, as it says the proposal won't actually tackle tax avoidance by large multinationals.
Irish Commissioner Phil Hogan, was in favour of the Commission's decision to ask Apple to pay back €12 billion of taxes. Is he all alone with this opinion?
On Apple, the Irish government before Christmas lodged its formal appeal against the Commission's decision that it should claw back around €13 billion in back taxes from the US multinational. The Irish government says Apple paid all the tax that was due in Ireland at the time and that it didn't get a special deal. They're confident enough they'll win their case, their main argument being that the EU is retroactively applying rules that only came into force during the financial crisis, so after around 2010, to tax rulings that were made in Ireland in the 90s and the mid-2000s.
Okay, we are almost at the end, but let's turn to Italy with Gigi Donelli from Radio 24. Ciao, Gigi.
Ciao, Danièle. Bonjour.
Gigi, according to figures from the OECD, Italy would have collected unpaid taxes of €8 billion since 2009. Would you say that the government was committed to get taxes back during the last years?
Well, we are talking about a never-ending battle of the recent Italian government for the very simple reason that we are talking about a very huge amount of money, which was calculated just by the Minister Beaudoin just 2 weeks ago in €190 billion. So, of course, there is a battle. Then there is a social development. There is a fact that this is a country with a very huge difference of production, of income, and of organization among the different places. The translation of the recent government, I might say, is the technology option. So working more and more on the digital side of the system in order to low down the problem, which for Italy has been a traditional problem. In the international field, we heard about Ireland, we heard about Luxembourg. I mean, interests here are different. So there is the tendency of trying to impose a major transparency, but still there are some agreements that are made by the Italian government with big companies that reproduce this attitude of being a little bit, let's say, on accepting a more gentle approach with big companies.
In a more general way, Gigi, what would you say about the government? Is it really committed to fight tax evasion at the European level?
Well, the government today for me is Minister Beaudoin. Okay, Minister Beaudoin, I think, is committed. Of course, as you know, is the same minister of a new government. So, interests among ministers are different. I would say yes, that Mr. Beaudoin it's very moderate in his approach, but quite straightforward. So, I think it is committed.
Okay, we know that there will probably be a change in Italy. Thank you very much, Gigi. Thank you, all of you, Hugues, Artjoms, for coming. Thank you all and see you soon in You Talking to Me.